Hi everyone and welcome to Portal and the final session of season 1 of our homegrown virtual arts festival to carry us through a very strange period in world history that we're having in COVID-19. I'm Harriet Gaffney and I'm the Artistic Director of Portal and I'm the Arts Development Officer for the Surf Coast Shire. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the lands on which the session is held today. Portal is brought to you live from the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar people of the Kulin Nations. We acknowledge them as the traditional owners and protectors of this place. We acknowledge their ancestors who cared for the land, rivers and sea and all things living for thousands of generations, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and future. I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Gunai Nation in East Gippsland, who have so generously shared their knowledge and stories with this burgeoning social enterprise, despite the significant and painful legacy of settler colonialism on their people, land, waters and sea. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and future, and to all First Nations people who are with us today. I was going to give everyone a sort of potted synopsis of the history of this incredible social enterprise that's coming out of East Gippsland, but then Andrea Lane sent me a video that she's just completed in collaboration with Josephine Jacoby, the artist who's joining us today, and various other people. And I think that there's no better way for me to introduce Float Inc. or F Inc. to you than for us to begin with the video. So sit back and relax and just have a look at some of the wonder that's coming through this project. Connor, would you take it away, please?
You went walking all alone, and you went walking all alone. And you were always on your own, you were always on your own. And you had no goddamn idea, no, you had no goddamn idea. And you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, and you still don't. But there's still time, you still got time, don't waste your time, but go easy on yourself. Got more to give than what you gain, got more to gain from what you give. Go on and give them hell, and spread love where you can, and all the rest be damned. You went walking with your friends, and you went walking with your friends. And you were always with your friends, yeah, you were always with your friends. And there was nothing there to fear, no, you had nothing there to fear. And you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, and you still don't. So give love when you can, and all the rest be damned.
utterly adore that video. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, Andrea. I'm incredibly delighted to introduce our super special guests, just some of the incredible people who have seeded, nurtured and grown this community-led regeneration that we will, for ease, refer here to as the Float Project, though of course it encompasses a whole lot more than Float itself. Our guests today are Andrea Lane. Andrea is an economist, webmaster, wandering creative producer and reluctant writer. She's an even more reluctant speaker and a social media tragic. She is also the co-founder of the Now and Now and Nudes, Fruit and Float, and describes the group that has gathered around these initiatives as a relentless team of artists, unartists, who choose to disrupt the traditional East Gippsland story with a new take on the things we love about our place. Andrea has an untrained love of branding, which culminated in the extraordinary video that we've just seen. And she's passionate about the economics of art, environment, and regenerative action in regional communities. Thanks so much for, coming along, Andrea, and agreeing with so little sort of warning, etc., to do this. Helen Shiel. Dr. Helen Shiel is the Director of the Centre for Rural Communities, a community development practitioner, an educator and facilitator who designs programs that invite engagement with the complexity of local knowledge. She is a writer, poet, a quirky caravan park owner, a sister, mother and grandmother. Coordinator of Stories of Influence at Lake Tyers Beach, a space for hidden histories to emerge into the public arena through film, print, walking books, art, music and performance. Helen says that listening to these stories filled in gaps in our knowing and changed our relationship with each other and the land. We are creating connections with a wider world. Visiting writers, artists, performers and singers return and listen to our stories. We all learn. Next of our guests is artist Josephine Jacoby, who says, "My children are grown, my grandchildren are thriving, life is good. My focus is art, community and environmental curiosity. Fortunately, I live in a region that satisfies all of this. My studio is situated at my forever home, Bungaluk, near Lake's Entrance, on the edge of the Colquhoun Forest. Here I make my art, which is increasingly centred around the Lake Tyers estuary. Mine is a mixed media practice with ecology deeply embedded in the process." And our final guest today, and someone who doesn't hail from the East Gippsland region, but someone who's been incredibly fortunate to have a residency on Float, is writer Harry Sadler. Harry Sadler is the author of The Eastern Curlew that came out in 2018. We both know 10 stories about relationships and small moments, a short novel about the aftermath of the Canberra bushfires of 2003, both published by Jindera Press. He's writing about the ecological, physical and philosophical interactions between humans and animals, has been published online at Meanjin and the Wheeler Centre and in print in the Lifted Brow. He was the joint winner of the 2014 Melbourne Writers' Festival Blurb Blog to Book Challenge, resulting in the book Not Bird Watching, Reflections on Noticing Animals. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm just going to look at us as a gallery. Thank you all for joining us. As much as I'd actually love to be visiting you all in your incredible locales, I must say that I am thankful to COVID for seeding Portal and the excuse to invite you all into the living rooms and bedrooms of artists, creatives, and people who are just generally interested in the sort of well-being of their regions throughout the Surf Coast. I'm incredibly excited that we're able to introduce your placemaking work to the Shire. But before we begin proper, however, I wanted to say on behalf of many, I'm sure, how incredibly sorry we were to see the horror of the fires in your part of the world at the beginning of this year. You've lived the most devastating epidemic of wildfires and that captured the hearts of people across the entire world. So for those of you who are from that part of the world, how are things looking now? And anyone can answer that one.
Josie, you've been...
Well, you know, we were very fortunate here in our particular patch in that we were, you know, frightened by fire but not affected by it. But the places we love, not far from home, are struggling, recovering, but some parts are burned so badly with such hot fire that it will never come back to what it was before. It will come back, but in a different way. So there's a lot of sorrow still.
Of course, I ask that because, you know, we care, like so many people, you know, locally. And I think particularly on the Surf Coast, we feel quite similar to you in terms of landscape, you know, our sort of waterways, the way our waterways run into the sea, the fact that we have a considerable hinterland and coast, etc. But ultimately, I think the horrific fires you experienced speak to one of the most fundamental issues of your sort of social enterprise. And that's the fragility of our environment and the need to re-engage people with their place if we're to move away from sort of the catastrophic realities of the 21st century and to make rural lifestyles and rural economies sustainable. Would anyone like to take this point up?
I'd like... Stories of Influence began in 2014 to raise awareness of how beautiful our environment was, but how vulnerable it was, because people who didn't know our patch, and that was most of the world, didn't see it like that. So development could happen, you know, gas pipelines, Telstar optic fibre, iron ore mines, you know, we're just not on a map, and we were just like, oh, there's something to drill through here, there's something to blow up or dig up, or, you know, and yet, and so Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people work together to protect that landscape. And look, it's impacted by some farming, but on the whole, it's about 80% intact. So we have this amazing asset that we care about in very different ways, and that brought us together. And we did witness 3 years of drought leading up to the fires, and you know, the float sat in the mud for quite a while, as Josie will know, and Andrea. And so our, you know, what we knew was changing even when it was being built.
It sort of speaks, I mean, when I think about everything that your group have done, and we'll move soon, everyone who's in the audience, to like a really sort of thorough slideshow that will show you sort of the trajectory. But when we think about the overall impact of what you're doing, for those of us, you know, who sort of work in this area, you know, the fundamental phrase is placemaking, you know, which is a term that's being bandied about a lot. But would you like to describe it? Would one, you know, either Andrea or Helen or Josephine, would you describe that from your perspective? What is placemaking?
I'll say something to get the ball rolling, and because I see myself as the newcomer. I've only been here 20 years. I moved down from the city to marry an artist, and I had nothing to do with the arts. As I said, I was an economist. I was working for Business Review Weekly for 20 years and ended up being a webmaster. So when I moved here, it was about surrounding myself with people who taught me what this place is.
I'm sorry, that's my daughter doing dishes in the background.
Okay, that's not mine. So I suppose that's just, I always feel like I'm a bit of a litmus test of the mainstream. You know, I came as absolutely knowing nothing about nature, about birds. I still walk around and say they're all just birds to me, you know, and so I love meeting Harry and knowing that there's stories behind each one. And then the beginning of the fruit project was a prime example of that, where I had no idea how to bottle fruit, you know, and Helen and Josie and many people out here know how to go to their backyard and get their fruit and create spaces through the bottling of fruit. That was kind of the revelation to me.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you for a moment just so we can begin sharing these gorgeous slides, because, you know, it is really quite remarkable. So for those of you who haven't, you know, experienced the glory or haven't yet seen articles or anything about Float, this is the beautiful floating artist residency, and of course we will get to that soon. So here it is moored, you know, so it doesn't float away. But we will continue and I can get this to work. Yeah, so fruit. Now, talk to us about this. Even the use of, I mean, your use of language and your use of graphics and stuff is also remarkable. So
that's my contribution, I suppose. And again, I suppose a career in publishing kind of helped me bring that aesthetic and that skill to what was happening all naturally around us. So the F route was about the idea that we don't have much in infrastructure out here, but we have great places, we have beautiful spaces, we have skills that were being really undervalued and probably continue to be. Do you want me to keep talking to this, or others want to?
I mean, I'm interested here in, like, for example, like you really, so you recognize what was around you, you know, there's that ability to sort of, you know, really glean as a group, you know, you've gleaned, okay, this is, you know, we're a food bowl, we produce extraordinary fruit for the rest of the state, and that I'm sure gets shipped, you know, interstate and probably internationally as well. So looking at that play with language and text and things, so you've recognized that there's all these little points on the map, yeah?
And I'd say we're probably not well known as a food bowl in that way. We don't produce a lot commercially, but everybody has it in their backyard, and that's kind of where the cultural side of it comes in. And those dots are where we took our fruit cart to serve fruit breakfast to those communities. So we just travelled around and Josie made the pancakes mostly, I think, and bottled fruit and shared them with people. Up at Cassilis, up at Swifts Creek, Goongerah, Tubbut, we just started to build this momentum around people's love of what they knew how to do. Does somebody else want to say something about Helen?
East Gippsland, I mean, Surf Coast, I'm sure you have scattered populations, but when you look at our area, it's quite East Gippsland is huge. I don't know the numbers. I do know that if you average it out, it's 2 people per square kilometre. So, like, it's tiny, and it's made up of little scattered populations along the coast and hinterland, as you saw on the map, and each one has its own unique qualities and amazing places, and there are little populations who work really hard to care for those environments in those locations. You know, Mallacoola's been on the news, Genoa, Goongerah, you know, some have Clifton Creek, they have some don't hit the news at all, you know, and they haven't, the recovery for them hasn't happened really well at all. But so what Andrea and Josie and everybody did was to link up those people with each other. So we didn't have a big marketing economy, but we had this thriving economy where people ate well and lived well, and it was a way of promoting that.
And so, you know, I mean, and through that, like, there's threads that sort of are woven here, because through that, the ability to, and I would like to come back to branding. I mean, branding for many is a dirty word, particularly for those of us who are, you know, have worked in the arts for a long time and stuff, etc. However, I would suggest it's like the skill with which you've done this, you know, to unite this sort of enterprise behind your branding. So let's talk a little bit further about, so you began with the fruit, kooky but very cool. Where did it go from there?
Do you want to talk about the stories here?
Yeah, I'm wondering, do the stories come in here, or do we go to Josie's glorious sort of seed pods, or let's
Josie.
talk about, I mean, because for me, like, Stories of Influence was where I first learned about you, and I brought Lynn Kelly up to Stories of Influence, I think back in 2018, must have been 2018, when I was working with Writers Victoria. And I was really lucky at that time to actually see Float when it had just been completed, which is when I met Josie and Andrea's husband, Gary, who's a huge sort of element in this whole project. How does Stories of Influence sort of start to sort of converge with this route around the goodness of your local produce, etc.?
I think they complement each other. I mean, I said we began in 2014 because we were just exhausted from campaigns to save the gorge, and we, you know, you can't get out there and fight all the time. We wanted to do something differently, and so we under Caravan Park, my partner and I at that stage, right on the beautiful gorge at Now, where the Now nudes and wonderful art was happening, and the
all
fruit
things
breakfast.
I want to get into.
And so we invited people to come and share stories about their life on the gorge. We set up a little recording studio. People loaned us their equipment, their sound. Jan Wazitsky from the Bushwhackers was a regular caller. I'd worked with him for a long time. And I knew that listening to stories which weren't mainstream was really important in understanding and supporting people move from silence into being heard. And so Jan really encouraged us. You know, we were sitting around the fire saying, what are we going to do? We'll record this. And he said, yeah, I'll come and I'll do a show for you. So this was Now. We're 170 people, you know, timber community. But people loved the river, people loved the gorge. And so people came and we recorded for a day and a half, and Jan did a show, and the community said, oh, that was good, let's do it again. And, you know, next year Bruce Pascoe came, Eileen, and it was before Dark Emu hit the big time. You know, his 40-year overnight success, that's what he says.
Yeah, and even with that book, it sort of came out in 2014 or something, but didn't get picked up till 2016 or 17.
And Eileen Harrison and Carolyn Landon came, you know, with The Black Swan, A Koori Woman's Life, and people got it. People just listened and were just, it was profound. And it encouraged local people to come and share their stories the next year. They said, oh, we've got a story, you know. Wayne Thorpe had come and done the opening, and next year he came back with his story of Bunyanda, of the lake, and the way to manage the estuary. And that was really why we'd begun, you know, to raise the profile. And we had no idea that that would happen, or that, you know, Dark Emu would become an opera or a dance, or, you know, like things blossomed, and we blossomed along with it. And we're a little event, you know. My partner and my sisters ran the first ones, but then the float people came, and they came to our event, and our hall was full, and they said, come and do it down in our hall. This is fabulous, you know. And then they did the food and they did the signage, and we grew. And Bruce Pascoe went to Melbourne and talked about us, and I walked into the Writers' Centre and I wasn't invisible anymore. People talked to me, you know.
So I'll move on. Josie, I'm going to bring you in here because it's interesting to me, like in the last session we had as part of Portal, I sort of was thinking about this in regards to the way that the arts, you know, having the arts in various aspects of life, it really does sort of tend to act as that glue that helps people recognise that they're part of this whole continuum. So could you, Josie, you know, as an artist, how did you begin to get involved in this? And you know, because your artwork is, you know, we see it throughout these projects, you know, it's quite key. You're sort of a key sort of, both yourself and Gary are quite key to these projects as artists.
I think Gary and I both are very committed as artists to the community and to the project, but I'd like to just hark back to Fruit a bit, because therein lay the beginnings of my understanding through Andrea what art meant as community. You know, I was a maker. I understood art as something that I made to tell a story that interested me. But until we began the project of bottling the fruit and then taking these breakfasts to far off places, you know, we'd hear about a little festival that was happening up at Tubbut or at Buchan or at, you know, somewhere. And we would pack up our traps and go there and make their event a little bit bigger. You know, we'd just add into it. We would add our pancakes and our fruit and our goodwill, and we'd do it with no expectation of return on that. We did it because we could see the value as for the community in what we were doing, could see there was a value there. But it began to dawn on me through our conversations that art can be a way of life, you know, and if you treat your art as a philosophy of community development, so that your art always, part of it is always about enhancing community and bringing it together and making things better. You know, we've got an opportunity through art to, of course, point at the natural environment and show people how wonderful it is that we live in such a place. But it's also a way of showing that there's value in all of the things that people do, that your peach tree and your particular way of cooking peaches is an art in itself. And if we treat that as art and respect it in such a way, then it becomes more valuable. You know, it becomes the glue that holds all of this together. And that's been a real lesson for me. I've learned through that. And I really thank Andrea and Helen for showing me the way in that. And so when the opportunity to build Float came along, it was kind of the same philosophy, but bigger, you know. It's not about creating huge projects that we can continue down a particular road. It's about throwing ideas in the air and seeing which ones are picked up by the people in the community, and then how we can help with making that, enhancing that and making that develop into something. And that's really how we latched on so firmly to stories, because Helen was doing such a magnificent job of stories. And we could see that if we went along and we cooked for that, you know, if we made a big paella and everyone drank wine and ate paella, and that made it even more joyous and more, there's more sharing involved. And that's rubbed off on all of us, I think. So now we see it as not just one thing, you know, not just my particular style of art, which keeps changing, but art as community. You're treating a community project as art, I guess, to turn it around.
And there's that sort of level of reverence. And, you know, I mentioned to you before we joined, you know, we all went live here about what the director of Geelong Gallery, Jason Smith, had said regarding our last session. It was that artists are in the business of seeing and compelling us to see. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things that, you know, this project does, is that it really has helped the people of East Gippsland to recognise the value of what's right there in the backyard, but also further afield. And Harry, I'll bring you in here because Helen first, she invited you to Stories of Influence, yeah? And then, am I correct in thinking you had a Float residency?
Yeah, that's right. So this was October last year. By the way, sorry if I'm yawning a lot. I got woken up very early this morning. We're having one of those days with these horrible gusty northwest winds in Melbourne. I got woken up very early this morning worrying about my snow peas being torn apart by the winds and stuff, and rushing out to put a barrier up. So sorry if you see me stuffing a lot of yawns. It's not any reflection on the quality of the conversation.
You're in your living room, do as you will.
But yeah, anyway, so October last year, I was, prior to that, I'd been invited to be a speaker at Stories of Influence, which was held in October last year by Helen. And then Helen and Andrea also offered me a residency on Float. These were two things that I had no idea about at all. In fact, I really didn't know anything about East Gippsland at all prior to my visit there last year. I grew up in Canberra, and East Gippsland doesn't really have much of a sort of presence, cultural presence outside Victoria, I don't think, which is a real shame because it's a stunning place. Growing up in Canberra, everyone went for their coastal holidays down to the far south coast of New South Wales, to places like Bateman's Bay and Cobargo, which we all saw in the fires in summer. And we don't really go any further south into Victoria. So before I spent my week on Float at Stories of Influence last October, I didn't really have any idea of East Gippsland as a place. And obviously I'd heard it. I've lived in Melbourne for a number of years. I'd heard the name mentioned, but I didn't really know anything about what the landscape was like, or what the history was like, or what the towns or the people there were like. So it was a learning experience for me, and particularly because Helen and Andrea and Josie and Gary and everyone who we mentioned have done and are continuing to do such a terrific job of making these things like Float and Stories events not just for a community but by a community as well. And so I felt very much like I was stepping into the midst of a community. And even in my time on Float, which is ostensibly and by design and by necessity a sort of isolated kind of experience. You're sitting we saw the slide there, and since then it's actually moved out a little further into the lake, or it's been towed out a little further into the lake. So it's not right next to the jetty now. It's sort of, I think, 20 or 30 meters out of the lake, and you've got to pull yourself across on a punt. So it's even more isolated, which is fantastic if you're doing a residency there. And yet I never once felt socially isolated or isolated from a community. I felt very much, even in my hours of solitude on Float, I felt very much as if I'd been invited into the midst of a terrific community, which was a really special experience, I think.
I'm interested in so when we look at your bio, and so you've been, you're a bird watcher for quite a long time. Is that true?
Yeah.
So how, what's it like to be given that sort of space to observe so closely, and I think you're right, isolation is so good for, observing your immediate surroundings.
It's terrific. I'm a little bit, I've always been a little bit wary of the idea of artist residencies, just because we've got, I think particularly over the course of the last 100 years or so, we've sort of got this idea of art as this great individualist creation. We've become very fixated on the idea of the artist as this individual genius, regardless of which completely ignores and discredits all the other people who contribute to getting a work out. Even a book.
Yeah.
My book, The Eastern Curly, wouldn't exist without the terrific editor that I had, who made it so much better than it would otherwise have been. The publisher who put all of their effort behind it. The people who gave me all their knowledge and time, taught me things about the bird and its experiences that I never knew. And so, I've always been wary of these residencies that isolate an artist, because I think particularly when you're writing about the environment and our relationship with the environment, as I do, it's very, very important to have an outward-facing eye, an outward-facing mind, rather than become too internal. You need to have a balance of both, but it's for me in particular, knowing and acknowledging that you're part of a wider world is essential to an artistic practice. And so one of the beautiful things about Float is that there's, and I made a decision not to have the optional internet there. I had a little bit of 3G connection on my phone, but not very much. And so there's not much to do apart from when people will come to visit occasionally. There's not much to do other than just sit and watch the lake. And that I found externalizes your thoughts a lot, because you're sort of slowing down to lake time and seeing what happens. I got woken up one morning by this almighty noise, which was a pelican and a cormorant having a squabble over a fish. All day and all night long, you're surrounded by the sounds of fish jumping out of the water. So it's this very embedded environmental experience, which for me anyway, really pulled me outside of myself, but it also gave me the time and space to reflect more deeply on my own experiences and how they might, you know, interact or speak to the world around me.
We're talking about, it's about in some ways we're talking about sort of those hidden histories and those narratives that remain untold, you know, in the art making practice, in the way that it is part, like, because yeah, every artist, you know, we have this very Western notion of the artist, you know, in his garret, you know, and he's generally a male, and he's generally, you know, and he's away from everything, he's struggling over his own brilliance, you know. But actually, it's, you know, for any creative practitioner that I know, including myself, you know, it really does take that entire sort of community to support you to be able to have that practice.
Oh, sorry, just speaking to the current moment we're in, because I'm in Melbourne at the moment, and I know that a lot of artists and creators and writers here, one of the things they're struggling with is the fact that those communal spaces, even if they're just cafes or bars or something, have been closed down. And so that's one thing that a lot of people are struggling with in terms of making their art, because they don't have access to that, you know, those communal external environments anymore. Exchanges,
yeah. And I mean, for so many writers too, just a little tiny tangent, you know, they a lot of writers do actually, you know, do that sort of that trope of sitting in a cafe for 6 hours with one coffee, but that it's almost like that buzz around you can help you channel, you know, and help you focus. But getting back to this idea, and this is opening up again to the entire panel, around the sort of hidden narratives and bringing them to light, bringing the richness of those hidden narratives of places to light. I'm wondering, and something that occurs to me, and something that I was really struck by when I was up visiting you, was the way that you have been able to not only bring the stories of goodness from your area to light in a way that has banded people from all sorts of different sort of, you know, you would think, you know, I would assume that you've got people from, you know, with different politics and you know, different belief structures, etc., but people are banding around this movement. But thinking about the wider Australian story for a moment, and our need to reconcile our own histories and the stories that remain hidden there, the brilliant way that stories has helped bring to the light of day some of the stories that haven't been, of the settlement of Gippsland, that haven't been acknowledged before, and have helped, you know, make extraordinary movements towards healing in that space. Is that fair to say, Helen?
Indeed, it has. And I think some of the experience I saw of what Harry, you know, what happened when Harry came, you know, he began walking down the lake on the first day. He did the opening walk, and people came and showed him, you know, what was in the estuary and what the birds were feeding on and which birds were there. And people immediately invited him places. And the next morning he got taken out on the lake to see someone's place, and people did interviews, and you immediately belong when you come as a guest. And that trust and experience, I think, was quite amazing. And I know Josie and Harry, you know, had late night discussions about the mud, you know, and recording the bats and helping us learn. And I think that relationship to the place was an amazing thing for all of us. But in relation to other stories which were more difficult, we screened the Warrigal Creek Massacres, a film, 2 years ago, I think now, made by Swinburne filmmakers. And that was quite a profound experience, and some of the people in the film were with us, Libby Balderstone, Doris Patton, and some others. And we try and mix things up. So we deal with the difficult ones as well as, like Harry's, you know, it was a connection with us across the world, the places that the Eastern Curlew travels. But both of them talk about the policies and how we live impacting on us and other places. But I think what happened when we screened the movies and people shared stories the impact of policies that devastated themselves and their families, is there was a space to sit with them and to say, what did we know? What more can we find out? You know, by the end of that session, and they go for 3 days, the gathering, there was the feedback from people like Uncle Herb Patton, the wonderful gumleaf player, saying, I'd never heard the sadness from a white person's perspective before. This is quite amazing. I'm going back to tell people in Melbourne that, you know, white people are struggling with this too, these painful stories. And so being able to sit together and say how painful they were from everybody's point of view gave us a way to try and take steps to recognise what had happened in our area. People came forward and, you know, there's lots of crying. People said, well, we didn't know, and they went off to find out why they didn't know. What was in the official histories? Why was it hidden? Why did we have, you know, place names after people who'd committed murders? And we also linked with Kel Flynn, young Scottish journalist who did Thicker Than Water about her ancestors, Angus Macmillan, and she travelled through where he went, and with the sons of Albert Mullett, the grandsons of Albert Mullett. So Aboriginal people who were affected, she made that journey with them and tried to understand what had happened to cause this devastation. So we looked at it from lots of different points of view, and we all sat together.
I find it really interesting because you've been, like, as an entire group, you've been able to bring, you know, like, for example, the idea of turning up to small regional communities with a fruit cart, you know, that looks, now if I flick through some of these images, okay, so I may have gone past the carts, but here, you know, you have, and there's some other wonderful images of sort of, you know, what we would, you know, we might perceive as sort of gypsy-ish looking carts, etc. And to turn up in small regional communities with things that look funky and stuff like that can challenge some people's perceptions and things. But it's the extraordinary level of trust that has been built throughout this entire, you know, enterprise that really strikes me, and the way that, you know, people's hearts have been open to this and they're enthusiastically engaging with it. Would anyone, Josie or Andrea, what do you think about that trust? I mean, Andrea, you arrived 20 years ago from the city with it, you know, having written for Business Review Weekly for all of that time, etc. You know, how do you get people who aren't used to sort of, you know, maybe city ideas or whatever to get behind you in this way and to trust?
I always defer to Josie's commentary on this, but I will say a little bit that I can speak to, because I suppose what I do is as much a mystery to them as it is their art is to me, you know. And you were stopped on a slide back there for a while that was a canvas tent that we made. And I was going to chime in here to say what came out of those fruit breakfasts was Fruitville. So, and that became an annual breakfast, and that brought about 200 people for breakfast, and we celebrated with Johnsonville peaches, and they were just fabulous events. That sign there, that's the fruit sign, is salvaged from an old food store sign that was on a general store in one of the towns, you know, and the guy who made the fruit cart actually remodeled one of the letters so that we had a U, because there was no U in the food store. The tent behind it was designed because we were occupying Docklands as a artist-made travel bureau as part of Renew Docklands. So the Marcus Westbury model was brought to Docklands. I don't think it was terribly successful, but it certainly built us amazing partnerships that continue to this day, that respected what fruit was doing and kept contributing to it. There was an architect in Docklands next door to us, and we'd just done the Crunch program with social traders. We'd built a business plan around glamping in East Gippsland. We were really trying, and that was quite a while ago. So we were really trying to pioneer that idea of communities benefiting economically from all the stuff we were learning and gathering. And as an outcome of that glamping business case that we wrote to bring high-paying campers to East Gippsland, I put out a call for a design for a glamping tent, put it through, you know, flicked it to the architects next door as well. The brief actually went global. You know, we had entries from all around the world of people who wanted to play with this idea of beautiful designs. The people that actually won that design was Giant Grass, who a lot of people know. They're a bamboo design company in Melbourne. And then we crowdfunded the building of that tent. So we had to raise another $10,000 or so. So I guess they were the kind of things that I bought because I simply, I don't know, had time on my hands or something. You know, for me, that's part of the fun, is actually to always elevate it to create that branding kind of thing. So, what was just dabbling back then in those areas has now just kept growing and growing through the network growing and our capacity growing and the interest growing. And I think quite a global interest in what we're doing. Very niche, you know, we're not here to take the mass audience and bring them here to East Gippsland. But if this kind of stuff turns you on, you kind of know that we're making it happen here. So, and getting a bit more credibility for it. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move through some of these images because they are beautiful, and I think they're really, and also, you know, it's an overused word, but incredibly inspirational, you know, what you've managed to achieve. Foundry. So Foundry, and you know, I've got to love a program that sort of revolves around the F word. Tell us, would someone give us a brief little introduction to Foundry?
Josie?
Well, I was going to say Andrea, because you were really, I believe, the founder of Foundry. It's a little arts and crafts collective that, you know, I always trot it out as being the perfect example of why what we're doing succeeds, or the thing that we can showcase and say, this is how our philosophy works and what it can achieve. And this little business, it's run by, 3 women now in Bairnsdale, and it's sort of hidden down a little laneway, but they're good creative thinkers and they drive it well. I think they've got something like 35 artists involved in it, and it's run cooperative style, but the shop pays its way and draws an income for all of those people and pays a couple of wages for several people a couple of days a week, you know. And I think as a community effort, it just shines. It shines. It's beautiful. It's really well loved. The quality of the fare that's in there, that's offered up, is brilliant. And because we love it, we all support it, you know.
Can I ask you about, do you have much support from your local government? In, you know, like Foundry, is the shop paid for entirely by the cooperative?
Oh, yeah, yes, it is. It runs entirely on its own resources. We get lots of encouragement from local government, applause from the side, and you know, praise, but we don't get any financial support or much else, really. You know,
It's interesting, isn't it? Because for me, when I come to a small town, and it's one of the beautiful things, is I made that long, rather arduous journey up to East Gippsland from this side of the coast, and I arrived in Bairnsdale, and I must have, I know how I knew, because I'd met you both. I'd met Andrea and you, Josie, and Helen before, and you're all wearing these amazing earrings. And I knew so, and you might see there's 3 of us wearing these earrings today. And so you put me on to Foundry. But for me, when I go to a regional centre, I absolutely want to be able to find the handmade and the local, you know, to know what's coming out of that place. And so it was such an incredible, I'm still using the shampoo bars that I got there. You know, such an incredible place to showcase and to delight in what people are actually doing in your part of the world.
I actually wish we had Jess here today. That is Jess in the photo, I think, standing next to the guy in the orange shirt. Jess came on board with the Now Nudes when she was about 17 and really just has flourished in her own right. She did all the visual graphics for us that became the brand that we were, and you know, she's a force of her own now. I think Foundry turns over about 100,000 a year or something, I think, and I actually think
it's more than that. It's
Wow.
quite a bit more.
Wow.
And I think the other thing that was really important to be aware of, that this was 3 younger women who run Foundry. Jill is a jeweler, the one that makes the earrings. You know, she sells at the Heidi Gallery. Her work is just brilliant, and we really have so few opportunities to provide employment for young people in the arts here, and so Foundry, you know, something that's worked for them and for us.
That's incredibly. I'm so pleased to hear that, because you know, here on the Surf Coast, we're also thinking similarly. You know, we in terms of we're a regional creative hotspot, and we have so many young people, but they've really struggled to find work in the arts here because we don't have any sustainable models like this and this sort of thing. You know, that the fact that you develop so much more than shop skills through running and managing places like this, and the value of these to communities and to young, communities in a generational sense is so fabulous. I'm thinking again, I'm moving back a little bit towards those that first tier of relationship building with the traditional owners, which is what I think, you know, you've probably achieved so significantly with stories of influence, that now, you know, you have, you know, the traditional owners from your area strongly participating in everything that you do. Tell us what, you know, where are you moving to now? You know, what's the future? What's the incubator? Where are we going?
I'll just begin. Andrea will come in, and Josie.
Yes,
Josie has the longest relationship. Josie's mother, you know, had a living relationship with many of the Lake Tyers people. It's a contested landscape, Lake Tyers. You know, it's the stories are of the damage of the policies. You know, and every layer of policies we understand caused division and damage, and you know, the more we hear, the more shame there is, really. And so we're honoured to find people who will walk with us and talk with us and share stories and say, come and be custodians with us. You know, like we need to move beyond black and white, and a lot of us are a bit of both. So let's do things which cause less damage, which heal. And we've been privileged that one of the outcomes from watching the Warrigal Creek massacres and the research that went on after that to look at massacres that had happened in East Gippsland was working with Uncle Max Dulaman Harrison, who now lives in New South Wales, but is a descendant of massacres that happened around the Orbost area. And he is a writer, My People's Dreaming, and he's doing another book, Rivers of Kinship, on that massacre. But they invited us to a healing ceremony of the land and a celebration of the survival of culture at the end of last year. And that was probably only the second event I've been in with a recognition and a healing ceremony. So it wasn't about division. It wasn't about them and us. It was about, we're here together, what can we do?
As I've been thinking about Float, it's been very lovely to have the opportunity to think more about what you're doing, because, I mean, Andrea knows I'm a strong fan. But as I've been, it really did occur to me as I was thinking about the questions for this session that you really are acting as custodians. You know, you're planting, you're germinating ideas and planting seeds, and it's all about, you know, it's that what we'd have to consider a more traditional way of being with the land in Australia. You know, it's about deep observation and recognition of, you know, what's needed environmentally, etc., and what's there and what is, you know, the really valuable, you know, the fruits in our backyards and what we grow and what's unique to us. Have you struggled in, you know, like with this, so when you're sharing, when you create space for the sharing of subject matter that is much more difficult for the mainstream to deal with than, you know, sort of little pockets, have you come up against, you know, has there been problems? Have people reacted, you know, people being, I mean, it's about being made vulnerable, isn't it, to recognise some of those stories?
We try and we have a philosophy, and it worked all through the Almanac, which was a monitoring of the float project for the first year, where we met every week and provided an environment where everybody was heard from, a very democratic base. And so it was about understanding the complexity of things, but everybody being welcome at the table to be heard. And yes, there have been, it's not straightforward, and there have been big blow-ups. But we've stayed together and we've walked together and we've celebrated together, and we continue to learn. Andrea, do you want to comment, or Josie?
I would say, sorry, Andrea, do you want to?
No, you go.
That to hear Harriet speak of trust is really important. You know, it's something that was through the journey of building float, you know, of being with fruit and learning about each other for that first part, and then taking that big step to build float and looking after each other all the way through that. And broadening the community so that we were meeting weekly, as Helen said, but meeting on trust, you know, to let everyone be heard and to trust each other. And of course, within any big group of community arts project, there's going to be problems. But the ones who find that that's too much for them and can't really handle that level of trust, I suppose, you find they disappear. And the ones who do learn to trust each other truly hang in there, you know, and it just grows stronger, so that now we have like a grassroots family of trust, and it's across, you know, white people and Indigenous people. There's not huge numbers, but the ones that are there and are still there really do trust, and it's so valuable. It really is. I'm so grateful for it, because in that trust you learn to spread that out beyond human trust, but into environmental trust and understanding that, you know, you can walk into a forest. It always gets to me that you walk into a forest and you have as much right to be in that forest as any bird or any insect or any other living thing that's there. But we have to, it's so difficult for us as an introduced race to understand that we can trust our own existence and be there as equal with the other species that we share it with. And I think that comes out of learning to trust each other. Then you can extrapolate on that and take it into widening circles. It's been great.
Is that someone's clock?
That's my clock.
I do think we were a bit fortuitously ahead of our time, because we didn't really rely on funding or getting anyone to approve our ideas, and that our, as Josie said, the trust allowed us to just keep forging ahead on a path that was informed. You know, we were really lucky to have Josie. Josie has grown up here on this lake, you know, so we can have a lot of respect for not being Johnny come lately. This was someone who was very well respected in the community to start with, and had such environmental knowledge, and that's just spread through the entire region. So we're really well connected with the land cares, the coast cares, the Friends of Gippsland Lakes. But it's not limited to artists, it's not limited to environmentalists, and the more that we do, that's often just making things or whatever, the conversation then infiltrates through that. So it's a slower process than normal, I guess, and not always been understood by funding bodies. So I think, I met with Creative Victoria a few years after fruit had been running for a while, and they said we couldn't understand what fruit was. And lots of people don't. You just have to be open-minded enough to say, I'll figure it out as I go along. I don't need a prospectus to sign up to this. I just contribute what I can offer. And now, having just gone through that summer and COVID and the isolation and the economic disaster that is out here, there is absolutely, the towns are dying from the lack of tourism. So for me, it's a really perfect opportunity to now say our art and our environment is the tourism attraction. You can actually come out here and support people who don't need to make a fortune. They just want to have a rich life and have a value on the knowledge that they have. And for me, that's the economics of it. How do we actually get people to have those mechanisms that allows them to pay the artists and the knowledge as an experience package that we can draw from more accounting experts than all of us to say, okay, you've done all the hard work. Now let's put a price on that. Now let's market it. Now let's put East Gippsland on the map as a destination for people who are looking for this and also want to support the region because they, as you said at the opening, people's hearts have bled for what's happened out here and it is still devastated. So I guess that's my particular take on all of that.
I just want to say to
go on.
Yeah, I just want to say to anyone who's watching us from our own multi-arts centre, the MAC crew, food, it's like, I mean, one of the things around that trust for me too is the way that you approach it, when you approach things from a really human level, like we all love to eat and, we like to drink and we like to, for me, there's nothing, I can't get my head out of my own garden when, as the various fruits and things come into season and the flowers and things, that's just the beauty and how regenerative all of that is, and sharing it with people. And, you sort of hit on this way of, sharing the delight in that. And also because you embrace it, it's fun. I mean, it's bloody hard work. And I'll ask you to talk from, in a little bit about your Tavern Tuesdays, because that really shows your commitment to that, building of relationship and of knowledge and of, shared ideas, etc. It's really hard work, but if it's filling your cup at the same time, that's what's the key to keeping it going. Would someone like to tell us a little bit about Tavern Tuesdays? Because I think, again, for our MAC group and for people who are interested in the new arts centre, community arts centre in Torquay, it's a really great sort of model of how to bring people together around different ideas.
Well, Josie and Andrea, you should start this, because I remember sitting on the beach, which didn't have quite as much water in as in that picture. And Josie, you brought your little port glasses down and a lovely table of Gary's and made a little speech. So I think you should begin this one.
Well, what I learned from fruit was that even if only Andrea and I turn up and no one else shows up for an event that we've planned, as long as we have a good time, it doesn't matter. And that's the truth. That's the bottom line. We do something with good heart and good intention, and you bring along your bottle of port and your little glasses and your tablecloth and your setup, and if no one comes, well, you're going to drink your port yourselves and you'll have a nice time, and you will speak of your intention and of your goodwill and that sets the scene. But of course, fruit set the ground for this so that people knew that we would do what we said we would do, and that if we said there's going to be an opening ceremony on the beach, then people will come because they're dead curious to see what on earth we're up to now, and because they can see that there's a magic possibility of a wonderful new adventure that's starting, and they want to be part of it. And that's really how this community in the picture started, by coming together, making a commitment around the idea of a project and what was possible, and then growing, not just building the float. I think that was really important, and this was Andrea's vision, and Gary too, not just to build the float, but to be sure that that was a community project. And communities can't build a vessel. They haven't got the expertise. You need boat builders for that. But if the community can see that everything they can do, the things they're capable of, can strengthen and support that project, then on it goes. And that's what we did. And so Tavern Tuesday became an expression of that, like to gather every Tuesday, come rain, hail or shine, to gather and drink coffee and for everyone to speak about their intention with the project.
And my memory of that evening is that, you know, we sat around in little groups on the beach and most of us didn't know each other. You know, we didn't know each other at all, even though some people had lived there or had holiday houses there for 20 or 30 years. They didn't know the other people. And by being invited to develop whatever interest you had, whether a photographer or painter or a sculptor or a fishing person or a bird watcher, you know, come along and have a coffee from 10 to 12 on Tuesday and we'll see where it goes. It was that open-ended. And so people came and people blossomed, you know, they were listened to, they were heard, and many people, you know, their husband would come with a wife who painted, and after a while they would say, oh, I write a bit of poetry and maybe I'll read one, and then they'd come and read it, and now they're published poets or you know, they're artists who sell their work, and everybody just got better, and the whole group would be delighted when somebody, you know, achieved a goal that they wanted, and we all it was that ripple effect. As they got better, we all got better.
I'm going to I'm watching the time and I'm aware that we should break to Q&A soon. So I'm going to take you to this extraordinary wonder that is Float. Whose designs are these?
Cameron Robbins. A lot of people might know Cameron. I mean, it was a collaborative thing, of course, but I guess they're his drawings that was the outcome of those collaborative talks. So Cameron does a lot of work with wind-generated art. So that was kind of a little bit key to his knowledge from having been an artist in residence all over the world and down at Mona, and being able to actually create those kind of structures. So yeah, that's.
Is he local?
No, but he had been an artist in residence here quite a lot over the years. Going way back. So he was a great artist in residence who listened to the community. But certainly there was more.
And he knows you. Yeah.
Catherine Larkins, Frances Harrison, Lenny Hayes were all involved in that design process.
So beautiful. So we're looking here now at a little sort of maquette. And this is a for our audience, this is just an example of the Tavern Tuesdays. So I'm flicking, it's the reason why I'm flicking backwards and forwards, everyone, is because I can't actually see the entire slideshow as I'm running through this. So these are more of the initiatives that you've done with the community. So you've spent a lot of time teaching people to kayak, I believe, and also learning so that so everyone can actually get right down to lake level. Yes, and sort of, you know, be in that.
It makes such a difference to your experience of the lake if you actually go out and paddle on it. It's very different from looking at it from the side. So yeah, the kayak club was a really important part of not only experiencing the lake, but also being able to help support the float vessel, you know, so we could have a crew who could come there and hold on to the ropes while we were moving it and things like that, and confidently sit there talking amongst ourselves while those kind of things had to happen.
Yeah.
Then, of course, other maker events that we had along the way.
Yeah, yeah. And there's one of your beautiful glamping. Oh, is that artist camp at your place, Josie, that we're looking at now?
Yes, this is a little isolated property that's always been in my family. My great-grandmother selected it way back, and we call it the bee farm because that's what it was traditionally. It was a bee site, and she made her living from honey. And because my art became very focused on the lake through Float, I I went and camped in a very remote place over the far side of the lake. I camped there for a month with a cloth in the water. I was putting linens in the water to let the lake make the first mark, and then I would work on that afterwards. And the only way I could do it in this particular place with such a big cloth was to camp beside it. And it was the most beautiful experience. I loved it. And I came back so fired with enthusiasm. I thought, oh, that's it. I'm going to share this. I'm going to start an artist camp. So I got some tents and I set these up annually at the bee farm. And sometimes I camp alone. Sometimes people come and camp with me. But it's a really beautiful thing to do.
I used to, one of my first jobs in the arts was I was coordinating one of Australia's now longest running artist run spaces, Watch This Space in Alice Springs. And we used to have a regular series of artist camps. I think every 2 years we used to do them. And, you know, John Woolsley, people like that would come out. And it is the most, you know, just be in a remarkable place and just silently observing and working on that. So now we get to Float itself. And here's some more events. And from your fabulous video, I see you now have 200 plus artists waiting to join you.
Yeah, look, they've all been on hold at the moment. We just haven't been able to deal with any visitors or anything like that. So we've had a good break in a sense. You know, it was a pretty mad couple of years building, mad year of our first year of launch. The artists in residence were all fantastic. But yeah, we'll regroup for next year and you know, revisit the program to see who still wants to come. And as that video said, look for more spaces now. You know, I'm actually pitching to council now that this has been such a success in bringing people here, and the social media that it generates, the artwork that it generates. Can we please embed artists all across the Gippsland Lakes in these half-used spaces that we have? So that's my take-home message from Float being such a success.
I'm sorry, everyone who's watching, to fly through all of these. There's so much to learn about this group from that. I'm going to, before we break to any Q&A, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to come back to this question about branding, which in many ways I don't like doing, but I think it's what you've achieved so beautifully here, or what it made me think about was that it's branding of projects in innovative and utterly engaging ways like this, that one of our own sort of key Surf Coast artist, Mark Trinham, was saying was an imperative for the arts on the Surf Coast. I mean, what excellent branding does is make known the wider narrative arc of you know, any project, I would suggest, or the overarching story in you know, multiple ways. How, you know, so you've come to it with this idea, you know, this sort of, you know, real understanding of publishing, etc. How important do you think it's been for the success of the project? And, you know, and one of the other things I was interested in too is that branding, you know, when you're branding something, not every idea has to be, you know, fully realized or huge or far reaching or anything like that. But it's branding in some ways it's about making known all of the sort of elements of a narrative. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yeah, and I'm probably emphasising branding because I, in hindsight, I can see that that's what I brought to it. And I was interviewed by ACRE yesterday, the Australian Centre for Rural Entrepreneurship, and they quizzed me quite a lot on the branding side of things, because what I said was, we just don't fit what the marketing bodies want to say about East Gippsland. So there's a big emphasis out here on the richer, wealthier towns, you know, Meetung and Paynesville. They have beautiful boats, beautiful scenes, wine and things like that. What we offered was what we were doing was much more alternative, but it's the kind of thing that we would travel the world to do, you know. So I think it's more just kind of a courage, I suppose, of just being prepared to defy what you're told to market and saying you're missing half the story. And, you know, I'm no great branding expert or graphic artist or anything like that. I just could see the things, I would just feel the response to it. When Josie did me those stamps, or she did them that were in the video, that just twigged the idea, you know. So nothing was me commissioning anyone or anything like that. It just evolves because you actually get a visceral response to what you see and think someone else will too. So
yeah,
all the time. Yeah.
And that you also see is happy people.
Yeah. Yes.
And you see, like when Harry came, like you said, he didn't know anything, even about East Gippsland, about us. He took a leap of faith, and you know, now we talk all the time, you know, and he went off and told other people, and so the networks expand, and it works. It's not them and us anymore.
Yes.
We're connected.
I love this, a field guide to Gippsland Lakes arts residencies. In many, it's about having courage too, isn't it? Courage, you know, a courage and belief in what you're doing. You know, you can sort of market, you know, you can, if you can speak truthfully about something that you've created.
And I guess we haven't had to waste a lot of time planning things. You know, there's a lot of skepticism, maybe in all regions, about the money that goes into feasibility studies and marketing plans and the processes they have to go through to be approved, to then spend hundreds of thousands. We do kind of make it all up on the run because we just know our audience, what we're doing, who to tap into. And so it shifts all the time. You know, we're not locked into some particular plan that is no longer relevant. And certainly COVID illustrated that to us. You know, things that we thought we could do before summer blew out the window, you know, and being able to be as nimble as we have been. And we produced this orange and white exhibition to go into the slipway, which is why I've got this orange artwork behind me, which was produced by Gab Moore from Sailor's Grave Brewery. But we could do that from our own homes and just say, here's a challenge. Can everyone make your art? Don't know when the exhibition will be, but we've got it in the cupboard for now. And as soon as we get the okay to be in public again, we'll do it. And, you know, I think that just takes a real kind of confidence and a trust in all the people that you're dealing with, and that they loved having something really positive to do during lockdown. So that kind of thing, you know.
Absolutely. I'm going to, I'm throwing up some links here for the audience, and I will bring those, or I'll ask Connor in the background to bring those back up at the end of this session. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second because I can't actually see the chat, so I can't see if we have any questions and answers. So Connor, if you could just arrange while we do the Q&A to repeat that slide at the end, that would be great. So where are we? Okay, let me have a look. Okay, I have a question from Michelle. What advice would you give community members in the Surf Coast who want to create something similar here? I like that question, Michelle.
Well, can I start? And I'm not an artist, although I did sell 2 embroidered hot water bottle covers recently at Foundry, because that was a response to the bushfires, a way of raising money for the animals. The emblem of my work is a teapot, you know, very domestic. It's about us people sitting around a table together and asking, you know, what it is, people, you know, what's going on in their lives and what they're interested in, beginning with each other. The invitation, and to do it respectfully, you don't have to like each other even, but you have to be prepared to listen. So I think the gift of listening is the beginning point.
Excuse me. It looks like I'm not listening to you. I am. I'm just trying to read some of the comments on Facebook as well. I noticed one of our fabulous weavers here in the Surf Coast, Caroline Hawkins, has been alerted to, she's, you know, says there's a space in Anglesey which sounds a bit like the Foundry that they could be used. So I like that idea a lot. And I mean, that was one of the, actually, I will say when I first came back and got this job, I had my second interview the night I got back from Stories of Influence a few years ago. And my now boss asked me, oh, where have you been? I said, I've been up in East Gippsland. It was amazing, the things that they're doing. And he and I promise you, I think that on the strength of that interview and how abuzz I was, you know, and he said to me at the time, you know, I said, where could we have we need a floating artist studio, you know, what about Spring Creek? And he said, oh, what about the old Alcoa mine, you know, so you know, it's about sparking things in people and, you know, getting their blood flowing, I think. I've got another question that's come through here. Lynn Hume, yes, I will send the link to the video that we saw at the beginning of the session. Yeah, and we are actually going to play, because the video is so gorgeous, we are going to play it again at the end of the session for you. And also anyone who works in council, I will be sending, particularly in our Eco Dev area, I will be sending a lot of this information to you. Sally Groom, who's another person who's working on our multi-arts centre idea at the moment, what she notes is that there's so much love and trust in your group. And I think, you know, it has become so obvious to me over the last few days, if I've looked at the work and after having spent time with you and things myself, the fact that you've, you know, been able to embrace so many different people. What else? Have we got any other questions here?
And I think the trust kind of came through a shared philosophy that we didn't know we had until we talked a lot more. And certainly the Earth Laws group really triggered a bit of a shared response to that idea that how much we all love nature, and that we could, if we just acted like nature was the boss, you know, and Josie can express this better than me, and just stopped having to fight over the rules and regulations around nature, but just believe that it was in charge of things. That kind of underpinned a lot of what we explored. And then the Michelle Maloney, who was the convener of that thought, shared a course with us called Transforming Governance that we participated in. And although it kind of was a bit of a flop for us in some ways, we weren't quite mentally geared for it. But for me, it did perhaps hold the key of abandoning the old structures that tell you how committees have to run, mistrust everyone. And what she actually spread the word on was there's a much flatter structure that you can learn to do better, and social media allows you to share, voting on ideas and sharing opinions. Doesn't require you all to be in the room at one time for a angry kind of meeting or anything. You know, you consider your opinions, you debate it and things like that. So that was really quite important in our evolution, I think.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that if I can, because I know that for us, a really key thing that's happening at the moment is that this MAC group are forming you know, they're right now looking at the management structure of this sort of community-run art space and governance. You know, what sort of governance model will they have? So, how does it work if you sort of flatten that hierarchical structure in operation? You know, you're an incorporated association, F Inc. and Float are incorporated associations. How do you manage that governance? Or how is it managed?
Well, I guess there's different variations, and we have to comply with all the rules. And it's great if you've got a mix in the team that some like to do the really tight governance stuff, as long as they allow others in the group to be like me, chaotic, you know, and that takes some patience. And I'm certainly not the expert on it, and I know it probably doesn't work in big organisations. I guess, you know, once you get to major art centres and things like that, maybe it's impossible. But certainly there's a lot being imposed on small groups to behave in ways that's suitable when you've got more resources behind you, you know. So I think it's an ongoing discussion, but I mean, others might have more to say on that, but that's been my bugbear all along. We now, Float primarily operates as a collective now with no committee structure at all. We are auspiced by the groups that jump through the hoops to look after the funding, but our collective can be as freewheeling brainstorming as we like, and we're always polite. Helen's facilitation particularly teaches good manners, how to speak to people properly, to always be positive about things. We're not that interested in naysayers or people who want to come along to undermine a project. Go and do what you want to do if you've got a different agenda. And we find that just builds a real momentum of collaboration.
And we have partnerships with different groups, like we don't have to be everything. Like the Centre for Rural Communities is the organisation that hosts the Stories of Influence. It's not under FINC, but we work together. So we can have partnerships with whoever we want, really, and that shares the sourcing of funding, it shares the responsibilities, being clear about the roles, giving good feedback. What we find from the really big institutions is they don't work for us. Bigger is not better for small rural communities. It's not better for most people in life, actually, because it stops the feedback. It stops when things aren't working. We know immediately. They blow up in our face, you know. So we can take steps to make it better. You know, if we've overworked people, they'll tell us, no, we can't do that next time. You know, so we have to keep learning. We have to keep sitting and working together to see how we can thrive on this, to see how we can do it better. And we continue to learn, but people come along, you know, like you did with the Victorian Writers Centre, and said, yep, we can help with this bit, and that keeps growing. And it's a bit ironic that this year we have more money to run stories than we've ever had, and we're having to learn to do it. We're setting up things this week called Dialogue at a Distance, which are a bit like little story hubs or book clubs online, and because we think the stories are important to have out there, not to just have a void where we're waiting. You know, we're wanting to create the future as having small groups who can speak up for their patch, you know, to be in the discussion.
I will say that for us here on the Surf Coast, you know, this whole portal program came about through our inability to run our biggest arts event, which is a 2-day arts trail. We normally have about 200 odd artists in it and moves through 70 plus venues throughout the Shire. So I realised back in March that we needed to change our approach. And the utilisation for us as an arts community, utilisation of Zoom for the last 2. So we began with a period of, with a program of free workshops to help people transition their work to the digital space, and all of those resources are available for free online, all of those workshops via our website. But this whole Zoom series, like we've done, this is our 11th session that we've done, like facilitated conversation we've done over the last 2 months. And it's been incredible for us in regards to really bringing it, and so remarkable, really bringing our community together in a time when we're all isolated. So I totally, encourage the use of this sort of platform. And I also, one of the things we were saying, you know, when Harry first popped on, he'd sort of put a lovely artwork behind him specially for this session, then realised his head was in the way. There's the artwork now. But, you know, like I also love the intimacy and the authenticity of this sort of broadcasting as well, and this sort of relationship, because we're human, and, you know, it alleviates some of that need to pretend that we're always, you know, at our, you know, we always have the right answer or the right question or anything. I love the sort of fact that this really shows you the gaps and the space and time and what it takes, you know. I think we are sort of at a moment where we do, what time is it now? We are heading towards the end of the session. Yes, we're 1 minute away. Did anyone have anything they really were burning to say before we finish up?
I wanted to see Josie's stitching. Josie, do you have any of your artwork there you can hold?
Oh, look, I've got this piece of linen, Helen, because you asked me to do so. But more importantly than the linen or the stitching, I did want to say that what we're doing with arts and community works, I believe, because we are doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for ourselves and for each other. We're not trying to bring people from far off to appreciate us. We're doing it because it helps us, you know, and I think that works. You know, it's authentic then if it's what you do because you do it. But anyway, this is a piece of linen. I don't know if you can see it, but it was in the lake for a month. I turned it into an almanac of its own right, in that the drawing I did on it, it's not a good example actually, but you can see some drawing there which outlines a map of that area of the lake where it was. And so it's located in place by being something of a map, and it's located in time by having the phases of the moon when that piece was in the water, and a little symbol for where the Earth was in its path around the sun at that time. So time, you know, an almanac is a record of time and place, and it was a major part of us forming the almanac that we did as a group, formed us as a group, and rooted us firmly in art. And so this was an outcome of that, and it's been a really steep learning curve for me. Yeah, thanks, Helen.
We've had quite a few people come up in the chat just saying how much they love that, and it's really difficult to see, but just from what we could see, the detail and the sort of wide branching cleverness of all of your work that I've seen, Josie, just is stunning and so inspiring. Yeah, I'm really hoping that at some stage we can sort of get some you know, some cross fertilization going on across, you know, across the bay from, you know, between us and you, and you know, with F Inc, and really sort of, you know, perhaps look at having some artist residencies, etc., because I think it would be a wonderful sharing. I'm going to have to thank you all for being with us, and say that I think we do sort of need to end this session. I am so grateful to all of you. I think, you know, we've learned so much, and it's so exciting for us as we sort of start a new phase of, you know, arts activity, etc., in the Shire, and that real understanding that we, you know, yeah, it's about. I loved the point you made about we did it for us, because ultimately we have to, you know, that's where it begins. What's making me? What's filling us? You know, like Harry, you don't go out watching birds for hours and hours and days and, you know, months and all of that because you're doing it for something. You know, we do that stuff because it fulfills us. But when it's coming from a really fabulous place, it's, you know, the benefits of that, that's sort of another F word, the flow state that produces, I think is just extraordinary. Thank you to each of you for being with us. I do hope that this is the first of many conversations we can have across this, across our state. Thanks everyone to the audience that participated with us both here in the Zoom chat and via Facebook. This is the last session of Portal for a month. We'll be coming back to you. We're handing it over to the community. So I'm really encouraging the community to think about your own ideas that you want to share, programming that you might like to see, etc. Get in contact with me via Surf Coast Shire Council, or email us at surfcoastartstrail@gmail.com. That's my daughter banging the door, probably the same one that was throwing the dishes around before. Yeah, thanks everyone. We're going to have, myself and the Portal team are going to have what I would consider a well-earned break. Thanks to everyone that's been involved, and you beautiful people in Gippsland and in Clifton Hill, thank you, and hope that we can see you in the flesh soon. But until then, yeah, thanks for being our very special guest today.
Thanks, Harriet.
Yeah.
Thanks, Harriet. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You went walking all alone, and you went walking all alone. And you were always on your own, you were always on your own. And you had no goddamn idea, no, you had my dear. And you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, and you still don't. But there's still time, you still got time. Don't waste your time, but go easy on yourself. Got more to give than what you gain, got more to gain from what you give. Go on and give them hell. And spread love where you can. And all the rest be damned. You went walking with your friends, and you went walking with your friends. And you were always with your friends, yeah, you were always with your friends. And there was nothing there to fear, no, you had nothing there to fear. And you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, you still don't, and you still don't. So give love when you can. And all the rest be damned.